All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are exactly 9 weeks through the NFL season, which marks the halfway point. And just like we did about a month ago with our quarter season recap, today we're doing our half season recap of the NFL as it pertains to fantasy football, going through each of the major positions: quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, and running back, looking at who is the top 10 to 20 players at each position, what has led to their success, and also analyze some major trends and major topics going on in the NFL currently that are going to pertain to us as fantasy football managers. So as always, like the video, comment down below what you've thought of the fantasy football season so far. It certainly has been a wild one. Subscribe to the channel if you are new here, and I'll go ahead and cue that intro. Welcome back into Twin Takes Fantasy Football, where we are doing our half-season recap. If you've been following the channel, you know that I skipped last week's video, and I really apologize about that. I was quite under the weather. My voice hasn't recovered fully to 100%, but trust me, no one was going to make it through 5 minutes of that video before shutting off because my voice was basically nails on the chalkboard given the head cold that I was facing. So I took some time off to recover, also save you guys and your hearing. But, we're going to come back today with our quarter season recap. I think it's a great video to do at this point in the season. We have a lot to jump into, a lot of movers and shakers when it comes to the top players at each fantasy position. A lot of shakeups since what we talked about at our quarter season recap. So we'll talk about players on the rise, players on the falls, and what you need to be paying attention to as we head into the latter half of the season to set yourself up for fantasy success in all those especially crucial playoff weeks. So without further ado, let's jump into it. As always, we start with at least my favorite position for fantasy football. That's me, the wide receiver position. At the top, it really hasn't changed that much. We have Tyreek Hill as the number one overall wide receiver. The man is currently on the record to break the single season record for receiving yards. Currently through 9 games, he has put up 1,076 yards. Yes, he hasn't had his bye yet. The bye is next week, but he has still put himself in an excellent position to break the single season receiving record of Calvin Johnson and then potentially surpass that incredible 2,000 receiving yard number. So yeah, Tyreek Hill has absolutely warranted his status as an elite fantasy wide receiver. And despite the minor setback that we had in week 9, I am not anticipating any slowdown of production for Tyreek Hill. He's still part of his Miami Dolphins offense, which is absolutely legendary. I think at this point we can now in fact consider them one of the greatest NFL offenses to grace a field over the course of a particular season. A lot of factors that we have to wrap into the Germany game. First off, it's in Germany. They were flying overseas halfway across the country. I guarantee you, having to deal with all that travel, being in a foreign country, being with the jet lag, the time zone, certainly had something to deal with it. I kind of want to throw out those Europe games. They're not really, just way too many factors that I think are impacting the play. Also, they're going against the Kansas City Chiefs, which are in fact a top 5 defense. They're a very underrated defense if you had them, if you've been rostering them as your DST for the entire season. While we're here, let's go check who's the number 1 DST. Kansas City, number 4 in points scored. So they've definitely been a fantastic DSD if you've been rostering them and low-key shutting down a lot of wide receivers. So I'm not worried about Tyreek Hill. He's going to be absolutely a monster going forward. A.J. Brown, the dude has been on an absolute tear. Tied the record number of games for 125-yard games in a row with 5 games. Currently, the stack between him to Hurts, or the link up between Hurts and Brown, is the most dynamic quarterback to wide receiver duo in the NFL at the moment. We saw that blow up on the sidelines of the Thursday night game against the Minnesota Vikings where he wasn't getting that involved. And ever since then, it's been the A.J. Brown show. Over that stretch, he's actually outperformed Tyreek Hill on a points per game basis. And this is not something I see slowing down at all. We also saw that Dallas Goedert will be missing at least 4 weeks with a broken forearm. So when it comes to the passing attack, it's going to be the Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown show. Absolutely steal of a pick. This is a guy that's been outperforming Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, if you account for his injury, outperforming Jamar Chase. Yeah, and AJ Brown has certainly earned himself an elite status as a wide receiver for fantasy football and in the NFL. I mean, the dude, some of the catches he makes are just absolutely ridiculous. Moving on, Stephon Diggs. Everyone's waiting for the fall. I mean, he's a little bit of an older wide receiver prospect. You know, I think he turns 29 years old this year, and everyone's in Dynasty going, sell the man. You know, the cliff is coming soon. He's going to fall off a cliff. His production's going to go down. But there's really no one else to catch passes in Buffalo outside of Stephon Diggs. There's no one really stepping up as an elite wide receiver 2 option. I mean, we talk at AJ Brown. He has not Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle is for Tyreek, and we have Devonta Smith for AJ Brown. But if we look at Stephon Diggs, I mean, Gabe Davis has never really amounted. He has those blow up games. He's a really boomer bust prospect, but he's never amounted to a really solid wide receiver 2. Dalton Kincaid is certainly establishing himself as a capable pass catching threat, but Keenan Allen is that dude. He is the alpha wide receiver. He is just averaging over 10 targets per game. The production is absolutely elite. I believe he has the highest reception so far through 9 games. So yeah, Stephon Diggs defies age, has defied father time yet again. Absolutely a mainstay of elite wide receivers as Stephon Diggs. Jumping down, CeeDee Lamb has moved up just quite a bit since we last checked in at the quarter season recap. I believe I did predict this ascension for CeeDee Lamb because the current way that the Cowboys were winning games in those first 4 games that they played was not sustainable. They were not going to blow out every single opponent 38-4 the way they did to the New England Patriots or to the New York Giants. We knew that at some point they're going to have to get the pass game involved if they wanted to be competitive with more high-end teams like the Philadelphia Eagles. We saw in Week 9 that pass game is going to be absolutely crucial. And CeeDee Lamb, I mean, I get it. Michael Gallup's 1 year removed from that ACL injury. Brandon Cooks was a high-profile free agent signing, but CeeDee Lamb is, again, that alpha wide receiver. He has that electric connection with Dak, and, again, cementing himself as, you know, an end-of-the-first-round pick. That's where I projected him in my redraft rankings, and I think he's certainly lived up to that billing so far. Puka Nacua just continues to defy all expectations. Again, I am trepidatious going forward. I think Puka Nacua's time at the top of the charts here as wide receivers is going to be very short-lived. We're looking at Matt Stafford potentially being done for the season with that broken thumb. Brett Rippon started as quarterback in Week 9. They just signed Carson Wentz to the active roster. No bias, but I really, really don't have any faith in Carson Wentz whatsoever. And we also saw, without a competent quarterback, without someone like Matthew Stafford throwing the ball and commanding that offense, the offensive line isn't enough to sustain. It's like, if we want to compare him to the 49ers, we've seen so many different quarterbacks come into that 49ers system and generate really elite production because they have a great running game. They have a great offensive line. Those are 2 critical things as to which the Los Angeles Rams are missing. And Matthew Stafford is better than what Jimmy G has provided for the 49ers in recent history. Matthew Stafford is better than what Brock Purdy has provided for the 49ers this season. And if with someone else under center, I just don't think, especially given how putrid that offensive line, they've been holding up well, but it's not something you want to write home to your mother about. So yeah, Puka Nacua, it's going to be rough sledding for him the rest of the season. He's been a great, just an absolute superstar. I love him going into like 2024, 2025. I think he'll have a long and illustrious career, but for the rest of, I think it might be time as we talk about trade candidates in the near future, he might be someone you want to move off of. Jamar Chase, definitely a guy that's come back into his own right. It was a major slow start for the Cincinnati Bengals, really predicated around the injury that was sustained by Joe Burrow in preseason with that calf injury. But thankfully, even with that setback they had in Week 3, things look to be back to normal. It looks to be the Bengals offense of old, the Bengals offense that made them a perennial superpower in the AFC, the Bengals offense that took them to the Super Bowl and unfortunately came up just short against the Los Angeles Rams. And obviously with Joe Burrow looking like that elite quarterback again, you got Jamar Chase. His talent was never in question. The offensive line is playing a little bit better. So yeah, Jamar Chase, his ascension back to the top 10 was going to be all but inevitable as long as Joe Burrow's health came back into play. Moving on, I can't talk about, this video would go on forever if I talked about every single one, but we're just going to hit on some of the big names here. Jordan Addison here at number 10. This is a guy that I really loved going into the 2023 season, especially if we talked about Dynasty Fantasy Football. A guy in rookie drafts that I was targeting. I know it was a hot take saying that I would I valued him very similarly to JSN in dynasty drafts. That still is, the jury's still out. There's still a long career ahead. JSN is still immensely talented. We've seen that start to emerge over the course of the season. He just has a lot more competition to deal with. I was very more bullish on Jordan Addison for the 2023 season for the immediate production that he will provide, given what he can do alongside Justin Jefferson, and they're really needing to step up as a secondary pass catching option. Now, will we see what Jordan Addison can do going forward without Kirk Cousins? Kirk Cousins being out for the rest of the season with that Achilles tear is going to be a major blow to the entire Minnesota Vikings offense, whether it's running backs, TJ Hawkinson at the tight end position, Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson, whether or not he comes back, that's still out there. But Jordan Addison, he's demonstrated that he has that talent. Maybe not going to be those alpha guys that we talked about, not going to be like an AJ Brown, doesn't have the physicality of a Debo or an AJ or the speed of a Tyreek Hill. But he is just such an acute route runner, where he is just such a technician when it comes to running these routes, that he's going to get his production. He's going to find the end zone. And he's just going to be a very, very solid wide receiver 2 and borderline wide receiver 1 when he needs to step up and be that type of player. So Jordan Addison here at number 10, stepping into one of the most high-powered offenses of the Minnesota Vikings. Well, was one of the most high-powered offenses of the Minnesota Vikings. No surprise, especially as he took over for the Justin Jefferson role. We'll talk about Justin Jefferson a little bit later, but obviously without him here, Jordan Addison, only natural he fits in here. Amon-Ra St. Brown, the image of consistency. This dude is just what you want. I mean, a PPR machine. Next year in PPR redraft leagues, I expect Amon-Ra to be going in the first round. He just delivers. He averages a high target share. He just delivers. He's like the postman. He's the Karl Malone of the NFL. He just delivers. PPR machine. Maybe you don't like it as much if you're in a standard league because you don't get all like the points per reception or whatnot. But Amon-Ra, he's never going to let you down. He's the image of consistency. Just perennial good, borderline great wide receiver. Always going to be in this 9, 10, 11, 12 area. He will always be around here without fail. Moving down a little bit further. And, we see a lot of guys here in this range, whether it's 16 to 21. I mean, these were the guys that, we expected to be. I mean, outside of outside of Devontae Adams, but that's that whole other can of worms I don't even want to get into with the Las Vegas Raiders right now. The incompetence that was Josh McDaniels, firing him. They look a little bit better now with Antonio Pierce as a head coach. God, he's so much better than Josh McDaniels. And you could just see in the atmosphere of the locker room, of the players, their personality. Yeah. Listen, 16 right here is a little disappointing as a Devontae Adams manager so far this season, but I think there are brighter things on the horizon given the shift in the coaching regime and getting the cancer that is Josh McDaniels out of that locker room. And then Devonta Smith, he's had a couple down games, but again, another guy along with Devontae Adams I really like as going forward as it pertains to the rest of the season outlook. Last season when I think it was with a broken hand as well, when Dallas Goedert left for about 6 games with an injury, who had just the most insane stretch run of wide receiver games? Devonta Smith was averaging like 17 to 18 points a game. We saw him get much more involved when it came to the Cowboys game in week 9. And with Dallas Goedert out, I think Devonta Smith is going to be the biggest beneficiary of the lost target share of Goedert. So these are two guys, we want to talk about as a trade low candidates. Try to go acquire Adams, try to go acquire Smith, as I think they're going to be very great assets as we approach the end of the fantasy season. But these are guys like Chris Olave, DeAndre Hopkins, Terry McLaurin, Brandon Ayuk, Marquise Brown. They were around that end of round 3, round 4, round 5 area. And, this is where you expected them to be. They were drafted as the wide receivers 15 through 20, and they exactly have currently delivered on ADP. They're not any better than their ADP. They're not any worse than the ADP. So I think this is what I want to transition into wrapping up the wide receiver section. This is why... and I talked about this before the season. I have talked about this at the quarter season recap. I'm going to talk about this now. I'll talk about this at the 3/4 season recap. I will talk about it until I'm blue in the face. We have a much better understanding of the wide receiver position as it comes to fantasy production. We're going to look at the wide receiver position or the running back position next, and it's just like a helter skelter everywhere. Guys that were undrafted being in the top 10, guys that were drafted in the first round no longer being in the top 20 anymore. The running back dead zone is a very real thing this season. It's just been absolutely horrific. It's just a scene in the running back area for fantasy. It's been just incredibly hard to predict. So it's why we're seeing more wide receivers drafted in the first round, more wide receivers drafted in the second, third round than we have seen in the past decade per average position per draft round. When it comes to the fantasy football drafts, it's just because we are so much more confident in the return on ADP that we're getting from the wide receiver position. And again, this is just a testament to showing, because of how similarly expected these players are returning on their ADP. You don't see, outside of a couple names like Apuka, like Jordan Addison, like Mike Evans, there's not a really wild return on ADP. Yes, there's a couple names missing like a Cooper Kupp, but going into the draft season, we knew there was going to be some issues with his hamstring. You could have probably downgraded him a little bit because of that, but it's very aligned to the ADP we came into the draft season with, and it's going to be, I think more and more of a strategy of drafting these high-end elite wide receivers early and often in drafts and waiting on running backs later on in the drafts. So yeah, moving on to the running back position. And this is going to be absolutely insane as we talk about a lot of these guys. I know we talked about not taking running backs early in drafts just because of how wild the landscape is and how more easily it is to predict a return on ADP for the wide receivers. From a standpoint of also, the production is becoming a more NFL passing league, and as we've seen that throughout the course of this season in particular, despite it being a lower scoring season in general for the NFL, we are still seeing that the disparity of touchdowns are coming through the air rather than on the ground. And the one guy that just completely sheds and before I get into the running back, and also the fact that it's such an injury riddled landscape, we talk about Austin Eckler, Saquon Barkley, Kyron Williams, Devon A-Chain, David Montgomery, James Conner, Nick Chubb. The injuries is just a very injury-prone position, and this is why, investing that high draft capital at the running back position is another reason why people are trying to move away from that, because they get injured and their entire season just goes to... I'll censor myself there on that one. But moving on to the running backs, we do have one guy that completely bucks the entire trend, the entire narrative that I just spent the past 20 minutes preaching on, and that is Christian McCaffrey. He is one of the most elite fantasy options when it comes to any position in fantasy football. I think he has, 17 straight games with a touchdown? I mean, there are three things that are certain in this life: death, taxes, and a Christian McCaffrey touchdown. He's absolutely blowing it out of the water with his stats, not only in the rushing game, but in the receiving game. Truly the heart and soul of an offense that highly focuses on the running game. Not only is Christian McCaffrey an elite running back, he is paired with the perfect offense to utilize his elite skill set and really features the running back. Christian McCaffrey, despite his age, I'm older than Christian McCaffrey, and I say advanced age, and I don't think of myself as an advanced age type of person. However, when it comes to talking about the running back position, he is, I guess, what you would consider advanced age, and he's certainly, that doesn't seem to be slowing him down anymore, and I don't think, there are certain players, like when I talk about Stephon Diggs, like when I talk about Christian McCaffrey, you do have to take age completely out of it. Tyreek Hill's another guy as well. I kind of went into that earlier in the draft season as well. Raheem Mostert, still sticking around here at the number 2 position. I don't think this is an accurate representation of what we've seen Raheem Mostert do over the past 4 to 5 games. If we want to take a smaller sample size of what he's done, like a "what have you done for me lately" approach, he would be much further down. I think he's really resting on the laurels of what he's able to produce in the first 4 games. In that one game against Denver is going to wildly disproportionately affect his rankings when stacked up against the other running backs here. Also, when Jeff Wilson was still injured, Salvon Ahmed was injured, Devon A-Chain was still getting acclimated to the playbook, it was really the Raheem Mostert show. So I think, he's a guy that we're going to see regression from. He's still a capable starter. He still is technically by snap share the lead running back 1 for the Miami Dolphins. However, you're going to see regression as Devon A-Chain comes back from IR, as Jeff Wilson gets more involved in the passing game. He's a capable starter. I like to chalk him up to 9 to 10 points per game. He seems to have a nose for the end zone and has salvaged his past 3 weeks with a rushing touchdown. But yeah, I don't think he's going to provide you wide running back 2 type of talent here. Moving on, number 3, Travis Etienne, definitely a guy I want to talk about because he was a guy that I was quite low on coming into this season, but he has absolutely outperformed everything I thought he was capable of, especially being a lighter back. He's only 5'9", about 195 pounds, but he's been able to stay healthy. He's been able to avoid any injury concerns. And the dude is explosive. Maybe that 1 year off from the Liz Frank injury in his rookie year was what he needed to recover from some use and abuse at Clemson, come into the Jacksonville Jaguars and just absolutely explode. He does have that dynamic. I mean, we talk about it with the quarterbacks, not so much this year, but last year it was the whole Adams going back to his college quarterback. Hollywood Brown went back to his college quarterback. You want that college QB wide receiver connection, but Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne, they do have that Clemson connection, and he is currently the most dynamic weapon that they have on the Jacksonville Jaguars offense. We know Doug Peterson is a very run-first type of approach when it comes to his mindset as a head coach, and he's certainly running a lot of the offense through Travis Etienne. He's getting involved tremendously in the pass game, and as we continue on, we've seen inconsistencies from Zay Flowers. We've seen inconsistency from Christian Kirk, and we've definitely seen a lot of inconsistency from Calvin Ridley. So I think as they find their niches in this offense at the wide receiver position, I don't think anyone's going to step up and be a true top 15 alpha wide receiver, and it's going to be running a lot through Travis Etienne. So, we can call him Christian McCaffrey light because that's what he's doing for this offense. But yeah, definitely a guy that if you drafted him has been returning in absolute dividends for your fantasy team. Zach Moss, still here at number 4. Similar to Raheem Mostert in the fact that he's still riding off the laurels of what he's able to produce without his running mate being present. We saw Jonathan Taylor start the season on IR. And, even since Jonathan Taylor came back, we've had a couple good games from Zach Moss. We've seen Jonathan Taylor continue to struggle with injury at times. And Zach Moss has shown that he's not that he's going to be an overly amazing running back, but he's a capable running back. He is certainly worthy of a starting job in this league. But as we've seen ever since Jonathan Taylor came back, I think it was in week 7 where, we saw him actually start really being incorporated into the offense. He finally in week 7 had more snap share than Zach Moss. Jonathan Taylor had more target share, more opportunity share than Zach Moss. And I think, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. The bell has finally tolled on Zach Moss this season. I think when we come in our 3-quarter season recap, we'll see Zach Moss fall quite a bit lower on this list. And only needs to look to this past weekend to see how that's going to happen. Jonathan Taylor had an amazing game of over 20 points, was heavily utilized in the offense. Zach Moss finished with only 2.6 points in a half PPR format. So I think that's going to be very indicative of the usage and utilization percentages that we're going to see going forward. So Zach Moss, it was fun while it lasted, and I salute you for your work, but it's time to move on. Josh Jacobs, a guy that I was incredibly surprised to see here in the top 5, given how horrific how horrific his start to the season was, and we can attribute that certainly to not being present for training camp and holding out. Historically, the numbers in the first 4 games for a running back or any position player that holds out aren't as good when they return to the camp, and return to the team, but also we can attribute it to the absolute dumpster fire that was the Las Vegas Raiders. But I mean, he's certainly a talented running back. He was an RB1 in a couple formats, especially in standard format last season. I mean, the talent hasn't completely just left his body. He's definitely a talented running back. I do have a little bit of concerning. I am a little concerned about his pass game usage. It's down significantly from what it was in 2022. But, he is he's running back 5 so far in the season. He stays healthy. He doesn't have the injury concerns of a lot of players that we've talked about in this top 20 list. And I think, with the moving on from the Josh McDaniels cancer, moving into Antonio Pierce, moving into a much more positive mind frame from the locker room, I think Josh Jacobs, with the talent, with the offensive line playing decently, they're an average offensive line, but you don't have to be, as long as you're not a putrid offensive line, you can be good for the running back position. And I think as they kind of sort out their new direction and their new personality, Josh Jacobs will come back reinvigorated, and will finish the season as a top 10 running back. DeAndre Swift, I don't want to say it's not a product of DeAndre Swift as a whole, because we've seen other running backs line up for the Philadelphia Eagles. Kenneth Gainwell has done okay. Rashad Penny has done okay. But, this is the fact that you're running behind a Hall of Fame offensive line. You have potentially 3, if not more, Hall of Famers currently blocking for you. Whoever they were going to throw behind that offensive line, we look at the production of Miles Sanders in 2022 versus what Miles Sanders just got demoted to the RB2 behind Chuba Hubbard in Panthers. Yeah, I think it's the offensive line of Philadelphia. Whoever you throw behind there is going to perform. DeAndre Swift certainly has that explosivity that you can attribute has helped him even more so once he gets to the second layer of that defense. But yeah, I mean, DeAndre Swift, he had a couple breakout games. Week 2, week 3 were amazing. Ever since then, it's been a little bit, there hasn't been that ceiling that you want, but he's been the image of consistency, putting up 14, 15, 16 points every single week, certainly with a lot of the other running backs and, the current uncertainty around a lot of the landscape. If you have DeAndre Swift, you're probably thanking your lucky stars that you have a set it and forget it guy at your running back position. Derrick Henry, man, what an absolute beast. I mean, you don't call him King Henry for nothing. He's absolutely a monster. And we thought that there was a point in time where certainly myself and a lot of people in the fantasy community thought that it was going to be the swan song for Derrick Henry. He was going to get traded away for the Titans, but seems that with the Ryan Tannehill injury, they found themselves Will Levis. Maybe the preseason concerns were wiped away. I have to say, I am a fan of Will Levis. His throwing motion is incredibly pretty. The way he flicks the ball so effortlessly and can deliver it downfield has really rejuvenated this Titans offense. And that's exactly what you need for Derrick Henry. You need to have a downfield threat that Ryan Tannehill wasn't giving to this running game in order to open up the box and give him lighter boxes. I mean, up until this point, defensive teams were just packing 8-man boxes just to stop the run, and Derrick Henry was incredibly frustrated. Now they've opened it up a little bit, opened up the passing offense. Going forward, earlier this morning, Will Levis was named the full-time starter for the Tennessee Titans, so it's going to be, hopefully a lot of good things for Derrick Henry to come to embrace going forward, and I think I will see a very productive season for Derrick Henry going down the latter half of the season. Gus Edwards at number 10. Oh my word, man. The dude, he's just a wild running back each and every week. And it's like, it's just because he's not even getting the bulk of the snap share. He just comes in and just finds the end zone. I mean, obviously these past 2 weeks, he's had 2 insane blow up weeks with back-to-back multi-touchdown weeks, certainly inflating his position as we come to these running back ranks. But yeah, I don't know how much confidence I have in Gus Edwards going forward. We saw Keaton Mitchell and Justice Hill had, not Keaton Mitchell, but Justice Hill had a larger snap share and a larger opportunity share than Gus Edwards this past game. Gus Edwards just ended up with the touchdowns and had that upside. So if you want to keep banking on the upside of Gus Bus being that goal line back, you can certainly do that. But I am approaching Gus Edwards' rest of season outlook with a lot of trepidation. I also want to point out a fact that, I've said a couple times, I'm surprised Gus Edwards is this high. I'm surprised Josh Jacobs is this high. I think this just goes to show, because of how many injuries have occurred, because of how volatile the nature of the running back position is, one blow-up week from Gus Edwards can vault you 4, 5, 6 positions because it's going to take a lot more to change your status as it comes to wide receivers because they're getting a lot more usage. They're getting a lot more points, and they're getting a lot more games without the lack of injury or with the lack of injury. And now with, how many running backs are being utilized by teams, how many starting running backs have we had? I think we've had like over 60 players be named a starting runner back for the NFL so far this season. So yeah, with that very diverse spread of players, it's going to be a lot more easy to move up and down the rankings with one blow up game. So some of these games are inflated by outlier performances. Moving on, Kyren Williams, I think it's very telling that he's still the running back 11 despite having been on the IR for the past 3 weeks. He's a great running back. I think he gets a lot of utilization. We've talked about how Sean McVay in the Rams offense, once he finds a guy that he loves, he really likes to, hyper utilize them both in the running game and in the passing game. I think when Kyren Williams comes back, even without Matthew Stafford's return to the offense, they're going to have to rely on the run game that much more. Kyren Williams is certainly better and more talented than whatever they're putting out right now, whether it's Royce Freeman or Darrell Henderson. So Kyren Williams, I think, again, his staying power here as an 11th running back, despite missing 3 games so far, says quite a bit about what he's been able to produce so far this season, and I'm very much anticipating his return to the lineup. Isaiah Pacheco. I mean, the dude, kind of in the same vein that we talked about DeAndre Swift, he just produces. He's had a couple blow-up games, yes, but when it comes to what he's been able to produce on the ground, he is their go-to guy. It's not Jerick McKinnon. It's not Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He is a product of a very high explosive offense, and he's getting the bulk of the snap share and the opportunity share out of the backfield. And then when you get into these positions where this is how the Kansas City Chiefs are going to run. They're not going to get in these wild shootouts that they had before. They lost Tyreek. They lost Juju Smith-Schuster. And they had a worse defense. Things have changed for the Kansas City Chiefs in 2023. This is the lowest points per game that they have scored in the past ever since Patrick Mahomes took over as the offensive starter. They're not winning games by offensive explosions anymore. They're going out, they're dominating teams defensively and winning games by running out the clock and laying it on the teams defensively and controlling the game on the ground. So when those game scripts tend to come to fruition, you're not seeing, this is why, the Sky Moore ascension hasn't happened. I mean, there's other reasons because he's not a great wide receiver, but, people talked about the Kadarius Toney stepping up. Rashee Rice has been great, but he's not a true alpha wide receiver. Obviously Kelsey is Kelsey, but no one has, but it's wild that with how dynamic and how incredible of a quarterback that Patrick Mahomes is, you don't have like a wide receiver one that has stepped up to assume that role. And it's because they're not throwing as much as they used to. They're getting the running backs involved. They're winning on defense, and they're having Isaiah Pacheco really control the clock and control the game on the ground. And that's why I love Isaiah Pacheco. I mean, he's going to be, again, a guy that floats around this 9 to 12 range for the rest of the season. Alvin Kamara, what an incredible return to form Alvin Kamara has had. Came off of that suspension, has been absolutely monstrous for fantasy football. I believe through the first 3 games back, he was the running back 1 in points per game. I mean, the utilization he has in the pass game, because Derek Carr refuses to throw the ball more than 4 or 5 yards down the field, is incredible. I have not seen target numbers, even for like a lot of wide receivers, the way Alvin Kamara is receiving targets. His pass game utilization is absolutely insane. He's, again, if you're able to pick him up in rounds 5, 6, 7, he's definitely a week winner going for sure. Bijan Robinson. I think we all can say with an absolute certainty that Arthur Smith is a menace to society, does not deserve to be a head coach in the NFL, completely got his merits through nepotism and not through his own merit. And he completely does not know how to run an offense, is incompetent, is petty, is whiny, is bratty, and should be fired for his actually, he shouldn't be fired. He should be jailed for his utter misuse of his top 10 drafted assets. We're talking about not just Bijan, but Drake London and Kyle Pitts as well. There's one play where you saw McCole Pruitt and I think it was Jonnu Smith throwing a ball to McCole Pruitt in the end zone while Kyle Pitts blocked. What mushrooms are you getting from Aaron Rodgers that has you designing plays like that? It's ridiculous. Bijan Robinson's way too talented. He's way too productive. The things that he does just boggle the mind. He should be a top 10 running back. Get him a competent head coach. Breece Hall. The thing I'll say about Breece Hall is I'm truly impressed by how well he's come back from that ACL tear last season. I thought it was going to be a little bit more of a long forging road to get him back to fantasy relevance, but he's been incredible. He's been explosive. I loved everything I've seen about him in Dynasty. I definitely think he's a guy that you want to go out and acquire. Maybe use the fact that the Jets are the Jets. I don't think I have to elaborate on that to try to acquire him, because even with the Jets jetsing it up and just being the Jets, Breece Hall is dynamic. He's involved. He's one of, I think, a top 5 running back in Dynasty as it stands going forward. Rachaad White is my favorite little matchup mercenary. He performs well against positive plus matchups, and he just does well against, and he just, craps the bed when it comes to very good defenses. So, he's had good games against putrid defenses, and then he's absolutely been vacant and left you with weak losing performance when it comes up against teams like the Philadelphia Eagles. So, as he moves around, he's a guy that's very matchup dependent in my eyes. Good running back, solid running back, is a healthy running back, so there's value in him being healthy, but he's certainly matchup dependent down the stretch. Devon Achane, the fact that he's still top 20, despite being a rookie, despite being on the IR for the past 4 weeks, top 5 running back going forward. I love everything Devon Achane does. He's in the perfect system, the perfect marriage of a player's talent and a offensive play scheme from Michael McDaniels. When he comes back, he's going to absolutely eviscerate this league. Definitely a trade low candidate while he's on IR. Hopefully you acquired him and had like an IR spot to put him on. Because when he comes back, he will be a league winner for sure. And then just a lot of disappointment around here. James Cook. We kind of saw this going forward. Historically, we know that the Bills are not a great running team. In 2020 through 2022, their running backs have finished a total of 31st in the league, 30th in the league, and 31st in the league. It's just not a team that utilizes their running backs a lot when it comes to fantasy football. Joe Mixon, we've talked about, he's a little bit older. It's not like the team really values him as an asset. They tried to cut him until he took a $10.5 million pay reduction. Ramondre Stevenson, there might be signs of life, but I'm not touching any Patriots right now. Tony Pollard, hold the faith. He will come back. He is a good running back. He's just been shut down in a couple games. I think they're overutilizing him. I pointed this out, like why he was so successful in the first couple games was because they were limiting his snap share to 55% and 60%. And that's where Tony Pollard excels. He's a very explosive running back where, he puts off these insane runs, but he can't do that every single snap. He needs rest. He needs recovery. I mean, it harkens back to a very vivid post-game interview he had last season when it was the first game that Ezekiel Elliott missed, and he was like, I can't breathe. I need oxygen. I'm tired. Yeah, because being explosive like that, breaking off those insane runs, he's not a plotter. He's not a guy that goes out and gets you 4 yards and can just pop up and jog back to the thing. He needs rest. So the fact that he's playing 77% of snaps right now is detrimental to his run style and to his game. If you want the true Tony Pollard, you're going to have to find a way to bring in Rico Dowdle and split the workload just a little bit more. Jerome Ford, it was tragic with the ankle injury, but he's coming back. He's splitting time with Kareem Hunt. He's a decent flex option right now. Obviously, Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, just two guys that I'm really, really excited for as David Montgomery comes back from IR. Jahmyr Gibbs finally had his blow-up game. I think, we were going to rename this channel to the Ben Johnson Fam Club because I just love what Ben Johnson does when it comes to an offensive standpoint. He's incredible. I think he'll be able to find ways to efficiently use both Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery in the same offense. They'll both be productive. If you have either one of them, I think you should be very, very happy looking forward to the rest of the season. All right. That's going to wrap up running backs. Probably a longest segment. I want to talk quite a bit about that, but we're going to wrap up here. Not spend too much time on the quarterbacks and tight ends, but something we just want to talk about as well. I think with, a little bit larger sample size, it was a little bit hectic ranking system that we saw after week 4, but now that we have 9 weeks, a little bit larger sample size, things have started to level out. And I mean, the top 3 are the top 3. I mean, we can throw Lamar Jackson in there if you want as well, because he's been absolutely incredible. And I did have him as my number 4 quarterback that you should be taking off the board. So I feel a little bit validated there. But there is a reason why Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and Patrick Mahomes, they all go in the second round because they're in an elite tier of their own when it comes to the quarterback position. With the dual threat that especially Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts provide, with the elite level of quarterback play, how more prevalent super flex leagues are becoming, how more prevalent that the quarterback scoring is becoming when you put up these 30, 40-point games. It is clear that reaching for these high-end quarterbacks early in drafts is becoming a more and more popular strategy, and one that I will condone going forward. So getting a Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, or Patrick Mahomes in the second round has certainly paid dividends, and I think has returned adequately on the ADP that you invested. Lamar Jackson, it's been a frustrating. I get it. As a Lamar Jackson manager, I get it. It's been frustrating. He has such a volatile range of outcomes when it comes to what he can produce. And we thought with Todd Monken taking over the offensive play calling, it was going to be an offense that really relied more on passing. And there was going to be, he even he's like, I'm going to throw for 5,000 yards this year. Calm down, buddy. That's not going to happen. It's still predominantly a rushing offense. We've seen Justice Hill, Gus Edwards, and Keaton Mitchell all be very, very involved. And they've been, again, unfortunately, like in the past 2 games, Lamar Jackson has played well. He has been an wildly above average quarterback. The touchdown upside, which is where we get a lot of the bonus points for fantasy, has been going to the running back position. I mean, they put up back-to-back 30-point games, and Lamar Jackson's had 11 points in each of those games just because Gus Edwards had 3 touchdowns, and then the next game, Gus Edwards had 2 and Keaton Mitchell had 2. It's just unlucky. But with Lamar Jackson, he is playing well. He is going to have those blowout games. He's had those games where he goes off for 36 points. He's a good quarterback. Tua. He's the product of a great offense down in Miami. And again, this is why we talked about Tua. I liked him a little bit more than some of the other quarterbacks that were being ranked ahead of him when it was the draft season. This is why I like Jared Goff as a kind of sleeper pick at the quarterback position. When you're put in a position to win, when you're put into a very high octane offense, whoever's helming that offense is going to just benefit by the nature of touching the ball every single play. So yeah, Tua Tagovailoa, not surprised that he's top 5 as a quarterback. I don't know if he'll be able to maintain top 5. We have certain guys like CJ Stroud, like even a Joe Burrow making a ferocious push to come back and be ranked as a top 5 quarterback towards the end of the season, but I think he'll finish around the 7th, 8th rankings. I think he's going to be just fine. Sam Howell as a quarterback. If you're a Sam Howell manager, the Washington Commanders front office, and then we talked about this in the short post about Jahan Dotson, they have gifted you an early Christmas present for fantasy football. They traded away their best defensive line players in Montez Sweat and Chase Young. It invites other opponents to score on them. It's going to turn their games more into shootouts. They're going to have to be put in negative game scripts, which is going to force him to pass the ball more. He's going to have to face not going to be able to run the ball. Not to say that Antonio Gibson and the Brian Robinson combo have been electric this year. The strength of that offense lies in Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin and Logan Thomas so far. So yeah, I mean, that's obviously going to, hopefully lead to, it might be something similar to we saw with Jameis Winston, where he's going to throw some turnovers. He's going to take some sacks. He's going to have some pretty inadequate moments as an offense, but overall just being forced to continue to throw the ball and push the ball downfield in an aggressive manner is going to generate good fantasy value for you. Justin Herbert, with the addition of Kellen Moore, has been very, very, very beneficial for his NFL and fantasy outlook. Hopefully, he continue to adjust and produce in that offense. CJ Stroud, I really have to give him his flowers here. He's been wildly successful as a rookie quarterback coming into the NFL, especially going to a team as putrid and one of the worst teams in the NFL that we saw last season of the Houston Texans. And there are certain concerns around him coming out of Ohio State. I've certainly voiced concerns of him being able to make plays out of structure, making plays out of the pocket, and being athletic out of the pocket. And I'll be the first to admit I was wrong. He has come into the NFL and absolutely grasped the NFL concepts. He has the arm strength to be a very elite and dangerous downfield passer at the NFL level. He's come in and his pairing with offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick was a match made in heaven. They have been really tearing it up when it comes to his offensive numbers. And this is not just me putting on rose-colored glasses from Week 9. Yes, he put up the most points by any rookie quarterback in Week 9 with, I think it was like 42 points in a 4-point passing format. But yeah, and he's had incredible games prior to that. He's, it's not one game does a top 10 ranking of a quarterback make. So CJ Stroud has absolutely earned his number 8 spot here. And I expect him to be, I expect more great things to come. I think this is a very young team. I think they're going to add hopefully a wide receiver in the 2024 draft, a true alpha wide receiver. Listen, Nico's great. Tank Dell is great, but I think they're going to work better as a wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3. If they can grab like a Keon Coleman type of guy in the draft, sky's the limit for what they can produce here. Kirk Cousins was such an incredible quarterback, was doing so well, was top 5 quarterback, really threatening elite status when it comes to touchdowns and passing yards. Tears his Achilles. He's done for the season. Someone bring out the top trumpet, play taps for Kirk Cousins. It was admirable. And we just have to talk about Josh Dobbs. Like, come on, man. Josh Dobbs, are you kidding me? This guy all he does is win. Thank you, DJ Khaled. I mean, comes into a Tennessee last season, doesn't know the playbook, absolutely takes over and performs better than what Ryan Tannehill was doing up until that point. And obviously they had no faith in Malik Willis at this point. Then he goes and gets signed to the Arizona Cardinals. It was a last second thing. We didn't know if it was going to be Colt McCoy or Clayton Tune starting. They signed Joshua Dobbs at the last second. They cut Colt McCoy, and Joshua Dobbs keeps them feisty. He keeps them in games. They upset the Dallas Cowboys. They were in it close with games. I mean, New York Giants are not going to really say that was a close game or like that's something you should put on your resume at this point. But, for a team that people thought were going to be by far and away the worst team in the NFL, they're feisty. They have been doing themselves. He keeps them in games, and he's been a really competent quarterback. And he gets traded to the Minnesota Vikings at the trade deadline, is in the building for less than 4 days, has not taken a single snap with Garrett Bradbury, the center, doesn't know the names of any of his teammates on the field, goes out and leads a win over the Atlanta Falcons, who are a pretty decent defense, if we're being honest. The man is just, also, when we talk about picking up NFL concepts, we should not be surprised. This man was an aerospace rocket scientist at the University of Tennessee. The dude is brilliant. He is a genius. I will never doubt Joshua Dobbs ever again. He's going to go to a court. He's going to go to a team. He's going to pick up the playbook immediately. He's going to have an instant connection with wide receivers, and he's just going to win. That's what he does. He's going to single-handedly save the season for the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, this man, incredible. He needs some sort of award this season. I hope they create the Joshua Dobbs Award because the man, he's incredible. He's absolutely incredible. And also, unfortunately, not on this list is Joe Burrow, but I do want to shout out that he is back. He's been looking absolutely electric the past 2 games coming off the bye. It was a back-to-back 20-plus point performances and 4-point passing touchdowns. The 6-point passing, he was even that much better. He's having this Broncos offense look like they had in the past 2 seasons. So yeah, brighter things are on the horizon ahead for Joe Burrow managers, for T. Higgins managers, for Jamar Chase managers, anyone associated with the Bengals offense. It's going to be good eats going forward for the rest of the season. All right, going on to our last position group here is the tight ends. Let's not take too much time. I don't want his wellness whatsoever. Again, the top 3 are the exact top 3 rankings that we've seen from the consensus rankings. Travis Kelce, obviously. And I'm not going to talk about Taylor Swift because I hate that. Mark Andrews is number 2. Obviously, this is exactly where his draft capital was. He's performing as expected. TJ Hawkinson, tight end 3 on the season. Pretty obvious. I mean, I was lower on him. I was wrong. I'll admit that. But yes, certainly a guy that people are going to come into the NFL or coming into fantasy football. He was generally the 3rd tight end taken off the board, rightfully so. Obviously, we don't know what his outlook's going to look like going forward for the rest of the season without Kirk Cousins on the sideline, but I just spent 5 minutes just gushing over Joshua Dobbs, so I have full confidence in Joshua Dobbs being able to facilitate T.J. Hawkinson as the tight end 3 on the season. He's already built himself up a good cushion. He has elevated himself into that elite tight end status where he's, going to be mentioned in the name, not mentioned in the same breath of Andrews or Kelce, but he's certainly a guy that's going to be very, very productive from the passing down position for those guys. So, we've had the top 3. It's a consensus top 3. It's not a shock of Kelce, Andrews, T.J. Hawkinson, and I guarantee you they finish in this order, barring some freak injury. Sam Laporta is the one guy that I want to highlight here. He's absolutely been killing it. Normally we don't see rookie tight ends come into the NFL, but this is the Ben Johnson fan club over here, so I'm not surprised that he could really utilize the talent that Sam Laporta brings to the NFL field. He's currently still on track to break the single-season rookie record for passing yards. And, no longer for passing yards. He's cooled down a little bit on that, but I think in receptions, he's still on track to break the single-season rookie reception record. So, again, any sort of utilization for tight end is absolutely incredible, especially as a tight end, because we normally don't see tight ends produce for fantasy until year 2, year 3. I'm sure you've probably heard this ad nauseum from every single fantasy analyst on the interwebs. So yeah, but Sam Laporta, good looks for him going for the rest of the season. I'm very excited to see what he does the rest of the season and for the rest of his very long career. Cole Kmet. So many people just lambast me because I put up a short about singing the praises of Cole Kmet. He goes up and gooses the very next week. What has he done the next 2 weeks? Oh yeah, he was only a top 5 tight end on the week. All right. One weekend does not a tight end make. I was very much talking about the Cole Kmet season as a whole, has a top 5 tight end when it comes to, the Eberflus offensive play calling of the coaching staff in the Chicago Bears. Clearly they like him. Clearly they have him heavily utilized. His target share is elite. His yards per route run when it comes to the tight end is, again, all these metrics point to him being an elite tight end when it comes to producing for fantasy football. He is a guy that's going to be still, I think, still a set it and forget it type of tight end. Don't let that 1 week 6 tight end finish 0 goose ruin your perception of him, because he's been nothing but produce every other week. Taysom Hill is not a tight end. He does everything. I think this past week he had rushing yards, receiving yards, and passing yards. I think he caught a touchdown, and he threw for a touchdown to Juwan Jennings Juwan Jennings is the wide receiver for the 49ers, but the other tight end for the New Orleans Saints. He just is a jack of all trades, that Swiss Army knife. Has his upside is the rushing yards that he gets on the ground. He has that TD upside when you want to punch in a TD at the goal line. He is kind of the running back for the New Orleans Saints. So just having that whole versatility of just every way of getting some points from Taysom Hill obviously has allowed him to be quite a productive tight end over the past few games. George Kittle, he's going to be a top 7 tight end. It's just what's keeping him from being mentioned in the ranks of the Kelsey's and Andrews of the world is the volatility of the 49ers pass catching options, just because there's so many good assets on that team. You have Brandon Ayuk, you have Deebo Samuel, you have George Kittle, you have CMC. Not everyone can every single week put up a great game. Sometimes it'll be the George Kittle game. Sometimes he'll goose you. That's just the nature. Outside of Christian McCaffrey, that's the life that you live drafting 49ers pass catchers. But you start him and you hope to have a blow up week. And if he lets you down, hopefully you have other assets that can carry you elsewhere. Dallas Goedert, obviously, RIP to the Eagles tight end, was honestly on a really, really good show of form up until this past week where he broke his arm. Again, not sure we're going to be really considering him as a tight end option. I think even as we're going to use last season as a benchmark for his injury history, he was really not that productive coming back from his injury last season. So given his timeline, given that he's going to come back probably in week 16, I think at this point you drop Dallas Goedert. You need probably the bench spot more so than you need to hold on to him for a potential throwing him in during the fantasy playoffs. And even in that, we saw that when he's reincorporated this offense, he wasn't highly utilized as he was recovering from that injury. So I think play taps, sayonara, Dallas Goedert. It was good. The run of form was good while it lasted. And I hate Jonnu Smith. Sorry, I hate Arthur Smith. I love Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith is a great guy. The dude is genuinely like an awesome human being. Very friendly person. Arthur Smith is a moron. Like this is a crime. This is a crime against all that is good and holy in this world. Actually, no. One more thing. Finally, Jake Ferguson, a guy that I highlighted in my shorts last week as someone that you need to be picking up off of waivers. Hopefully you already had him on your team if you're listening to this podcast. And, he's really established himself as the second pass catching option when it comes to the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, Brandon Cooks hasn't ascended the way people thought he was. Michael Gallup still is really the third receiving option on that team. Jake Ferguson, he has really established himself over the likes of Luke Schoonmaker and Peyton Hendershot. He just has a better understanding of the route concepts when it comes to what they're running as it pertains to the Dallas Cowboys. He's a very crisp route runner. He's actually, and what's really led him to being heavily utilized in the past 3 or 4 games for the Dallas Cowboys is his ability to maintain control of the ball through the catch point. We've seen a little bit of the drop skis hit both Peyton Hendershot and Luke Schoonmaker, but Jake Ferguson has been very sure-handed, especially when he's being hit over the middle. That's where Dak likes to throw the ball. He loves to target over the middle. He loves to target his tight end. We've seen this with Dalton Schultz in previous years, and Jake Ferguson is the next in line of the Dak Prescott tight end bump. So, a great guy to target going forward, and maybe you can buy him low if people haven't caught on. I think after this past weekend, people will be a little bit less enticing to let him go. But again, if you have in Dynasty, that was definitely a guy that's going to pan out very, very well for your teams. So that's going to wrap it up for our quarter season recap. I hope you all enjoyed. If you have any questions, have any thoughts on the current season as it stands so far, leave them down in the comments below. As always, like the video, subscribe to the channel. And then again, keep an eye out for those shorts and those fantasy recommendations going into week 10 as we dump into the second half of the season. As always, guys, take care.